Hi, everybody. This is Joe Firestone, your host for Progressive Short Takes, and this is another Progressive Short Take. This one is about the long, winding road to COVID 19 immunity. And I want to call your attention to an article that was published in Presenza. And the article is entitled, it was written on October 5th. The post is also available in Portuguese. And it was produced by the Independent Media Institute. And it's called, quote, Why We're on a Long Road to COVID 19 Immunity, Even with a Vaccine. It was written by Prabir Perkayastha. Hope I pronounced his or her name correctly, Prabir Perkayastha. Anyway, the author says, as the pandemic continues to spread throughout the world, many countries seem to have given up the fight against COVID-19 and are now waiting for a vaccine to protect against the virus. With cases exceeding 32 million and more than a million dead, the world economy has taken a bigger hit than at any other time since the end of the Great Depression of 1929 to 39. And of course, folks, it ain't over yet. And the U.S. and India are now showing the highest numbers of total and new cases of COVID-19. Both have stopped talking about how to stop the pandemic and are only focusing on reopening, or as India calls it, quote, unlockdown, unquote. It seems like a good time to mention the inevitable. It's now late enough. There will be no more updates tonight. I don't believe, as of now, there, according to the Worldometer site, the United States is now at 220,011 fatalities. We're at 664 per million now, climbing very fast. It looks like the small country, of Ecuador, small compared to us, is moving even faster. Not too long ago, we were within 10 fatalities per million of them, but now they're at 690. Chile, 698. And Brazil has now far outdistanced us. They are at 708 fatalities per million. But we are still eighth in the world if we discount two very small countries that have high figures in this area. In other words, we are doing terribly and also shamefully, and we've certainly given up on controlling the spread of COVID, as the author says, and we are certainly waiting for the vaccine. Certainly, Donald Trump is doing nothing but waiting for the vaccine. But giving up on containing the COVID-19 pandemic is an admission that public health systems have failed. Yes, our public health system has failed. India, with a poor public health infrastructure, has one of the most privatized healthcare systems in the world. The U.S. has the most privatized healthcare system among wealthy countries with poor outcomes. That's absolutely true. It is not surprising, then, that both these countries have failed in facing what is essentially a public health challenge. The COVID-19 pandemic shows the contradictions between the needs of capitalism and the health of the people. Capitalism requires ill health for making profits, selling patented pharmaceuticals, costly stays in hospitals, and expensive procedures. The objective of the public health system is to ensure that people stay healthy, robbing capitalists of the opportunities to make profits. The good news for the world is that 41 vaccines, more accurately, candidate vaccines, are currently under different phases of clinical trials, and another 151 are in the pipeline. Two of the vaccines currently in phase 1-2 are being developed by Indian companies. I'm not going to name the companies or go into that, but the author says, to skip a little ahead, normally vaccine development and testing take from 5 to 10 years, so it would be a significant achievement if we succeed in making effective vaccines available by the end of 2020 or early 2021. The progress so far also shows we have the scientific capacity to develop a large number of vaccines for infectious diseases. The reason we have not done so for diseases other than COVID-19 is that such infectious diseases were thought to be the diseases of poor countries and do not provide enough profits for global big pharma to invest in vaccines against infectious diseases. It required a public health emergency in the rich countries for vaccine development to take a front seat in medical science again. As immunity may not be permanent unless we have herd immunity at the global level, we will continue to see outbreaks in different countries. The virus will not respect national boundaries, and while large parts of the global population have no guarantee of a vaccine, the rich countries with 13% of the world's population have reserved more than half the vaccines from leading vaccine manufacturers. And the article goes on with the situation for India, a different situation for Russia, for the UAR, and for other countries. But of course, the author goes on to point out these vaccines have to provide evidence they are safe and provide sufficient immunity by either preventing the disease or limiting it to a mild form. As some of these vaccines are two-shot vaccines that need at least 2 months after the final shot to be effective, there is no way that such an exercise can be done by the U.S. presidential election on November 3rd. So, if it wasn't apparent to you before this, the truth now has to be completely clear to you. There will be no vaccine by November 3rd. By November 3rd, vaccines will still be pie in the sky. And Trump is going to be offering, probably from now until the election, he will be offering you pie in the sky, what has been pie in the sky from the very beginning. Instead of moving vigorously to control the virus, he kept offering pie in the sky. That's no lie, in the words of the old labor song. That's what he's been doing, pie in the sky. And those who have followed him have been accepting pie in the sky. Of course, the moral of pie in the sky is that you don't get pie in the sky until you've crossed the Golden Bridge, as my grandmother used to say. The Golden Bridge is the bridge from the earthly plane into heaven. And I'm not sure we want to go there to get our pie in the sky. Once a vaccine is found to be successful in the phase 3 trials, it might appear that our problems would be over quickly, but not so fast. We then have the formidable challenge of making it available to at least 4 to 5 billion people for creating herd immunity. This means producing about 8 to 9 billion doses, as a number of these vaccines are two-shot vaccines. We then have the even more challenging task of setting up supply chains to provide vaccines to centers all over each country before people can be vaccinated. The CEO of Serum Institute, the largest generic vaccine manufacturer in the world, has already flagged that India will need about 10.7 billion to procure and deliver the vaccine, a further challenge to the finances of the government. He, of course, is very concerned, okay, about India because he's writing from there. He's Indian, he or she. The author talks about what will be needed to ship these vaccines. There's something called a cold chain requirement, okay, for vaccines, including the most commonly used ones like flu, okay, and polio. For the old-fashioned inactivated viruses, the more recent use, okay, of adenovirus as vector, the cold chain required is between 36 and 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Not too bad. This is the requirement for most commonly used vaccines, including those for the flu and for polio. But for Moderna's vaccine and Pfizer BioNTech, that is those vaccines which are the mRNA vaccines, however, the temperatures required are between minus 94 and minus 112 degrees Fahrenheit, a far more difficult task to establish the supply chains, even for countries like the United States. If these vaccines prove to be the successful ones and the others are not, building up a supply chain for the vaccines that can provide the colder range of storage for most of the world will take far more than a year. That's a year from the time when they're ready, a year from the time when the vaccines have been shown to be safe. If that takes place at the end of this year, and it happens to be one of these mRNA vaccines, then the supply chain will not be built up for more than a year. The vaccines will be in short supply until then. The other challenge is we've never vaccinated such large numbers in such a short time ever. In India, the pulse polio program uses oral drops and immunizes about 170 million children per year. This is still well below the 1.5 to 2 billion vaccine shots for India. Whether the AstraZeneca or the Gamaleya vaccine, both of which are two-shot vaccines. And for a two-shot vaccine, we have the added difficulty of tracking the people who have received the first shot so they do not miss their second shot. And he goes on with further difficulties. But you get the picture. This is likely to be a long and winding road before we solve this problem through a vaccine, which makes it even more imperative that we stop this nonsense of completely relying on a vaccine and renew our commitment once again to containing coronavirus domestically through contact tracing, through testing, through isolation, and through quarantine, through the techniques used by the most successful countries: Taiwan, New Zealand, South Korea, Australia, yes, China, Vietnam. We have to borrow from the experience of these countries that took the vaccine seriously, took life-saving as their major objective, and acted accordingly. That's what we have to do. We have to stop this nonsense and take the hard road. Otherwise, we've got a long and winding road until people stop dying from this terrible scourge. People are saying that by the end of this year, we'll be at 400,000 deaths. Well, what if this takes yet another year to get large amounts of vaccine to people here in the United States? Yet another year. How many deaths will there be then? Yes, we have to start taking this seriously. And that's my message for this particular short take. Please visit my Patreon account, patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. I'll be back again pretty shortly, I think, with yet another progressive short take.